chapter 20. So we just read chapter 19, and we had paused a bit there, and now we're going to be reading chapter 20. You get a double dose of reading. Alright, so chapter 20. Ben got married early in October, and it was in December that Haynes met him for the first time after the marriage. He was sauntering home along the pavement with his hat over his eyes, reading a newspaper, when he heard footsteps behind him and felt a hand on his shoulder. "Haynes," said the voice. It was Ben. "Welcome back. Exquisite designer J.A. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me." So we're back reading chapter 20. Where were we? So it was Ben. "Hello, it's you." They shook hands and watched one another. At the first glance, Haynes saw that all he had heard about the failure of his life with the nurse was true. In health and appearance, at least, his change from Mrs. Rose to the nurse had not been for the better. So we all remember Ben was with Mrs. Rose, and then him leave and go be with the nurse, and the nurse took him away from Miss Rose, and they got married and what have you. So the rumors were around in the neighborhood. You know, Jamaican neighborhood is already. Some of we are even African neighborhoods where people will sit down and they will talk, well, you know what happened to Mass Joe or Miss whoever. You know, we are other people. So people were talking that, boy, him go imagine him there with Miss Rose, and him go the nurse, him go there with the nurse, and him no look better and what have you, and him, you know. So you know people are. So Haynes heard the talk and then seeing him. So what we say now, Haynes is saying that seeing him for himself now, he realized that the rumors were true. Anyhow, let's continue. At first glance, Haynes saw that all he had heard about the failure of his life with the nurse was true. In health and appearance, him no look healthy and him no look good. At least his change from Mrs. Rose to the nurse had not been for the better. His face was blotchy, which with his black skin gave him a particularly unhealthy look. His cheeks were hollow, his eyes were a dirty brown color, and he was unshaven. His paunch, a sign of his well-being, much admired at number 2, except by Maisie, was almost gone, and the white suit was dirty. The trim and the slick Ben, who used to be such a delight to the eye of Mrs. Rose, when he took the street, was no more. So what he's saying, when him used to be with Mrs. Rose, him used to look good, you know, clean and in a white shirt and big belly, and people tend to think that, especially in African countries, they think to tend that being fat and, you know, having a big tummy, that means you're healthy and you look good and what have you. But we all know in most cases that's not true. But to each his own. We always say everybody is beautiful in their own way. Anyway, where were we? The trim, let's start back from here. The trim and slick Ben, who used to be such a delight to the eye of Mrs. Rose, when he took the street, was no more, and the man had not been married 2 months. "How is the nurse?" Haynes inquired after the first greetings. "Well, thank you, she's well. She out on a job now. How everybody home?" He continued to grin at Haynes uncomfortably, and Haynes was uncomfortably himself. He knew what was passing in both their minds, but he left it to bed to begin. For once, however, the fighting cock could not flap his wings. I like that. That is a little proverb. The fighting cock can't flap his wings. What a fool he had made of himself. Haynes felt he ought to have known that The wife living with him in 2 rooms would be less desirable than the woman whom he could hold in his arms only in stolen interviews. The material advantages which he had hoped to gain, he had lost. Maybe Haynes had met him at a particularly bad moment, but so dispirited was the man's appearance that if even he had not been caught in fish, his mistake had been realized quite as early and as disastrously as Miss Atwell had predicted. I hear Mrs. Rose wasn't too well. No, she's all right. Mrs. Rose, though thinner, had not had a day's illness since the wedding. I heard her nerves was troubling her. Not that I know of, though it may be so. I heard she was sick, Ben repeated. Perhaps she may have been, Haynes said. I know very little of what is happening there, for I am now away most of the day. No, man, no, sir. I hear you writing letters, making receipts, giving advice, and so on. In fact, you take my place. He laughed and spoke more like himself than since they had met. Going anywhere particular? Haynes asked him. No. Let's go over to the bar and have a drink. There is a private room at the back. The private room was empty. Haynes ordered 2 beers and they sat down on opposite sides of the little table. Well, how do you like your new life? Said Haynes. Not bad, not bad, not bad. But he avoided Haynes' eyes. Of course we haven't settled down yet. The nurse out working and I have to fix up at home, you know. But we will move soon and get a servant. By the new year, you know. If there was money, he wasn't getting much of it. He hadn't a cent in his pocket and let Haynes know as much. You have cigarettes? No, said Haynes, feeling in his pocket. Ben asked him to buy some. Let's have another beer. Yes, man, liquor is helpful. He smacked his lips after 2 or 3 mouthfuls and lit a cigarette. I'm sorry we don't meet sometimes to have a little talk, Haynes, as long ago as we used to do back in the day. I miss you myself. I often remember the good talks we used to have. Yes, ma'am. It's her fault, you know, that this happened. It's her fault, he reiterated. She used to bother me too much. I didn't know that. Yes, ma'am. I used to tell her to let me go out and do a little business. I have good luck, you know. I understand science. These people are something else. Hear him now. I understand science, as you know, Haynes, and I know when to start a business and make it successful. Some things, if you start on a Friday, must turn out bad. And some things again, Friday is your only day. And little things I know. But she was always hampering me. She never wanted me to go out. I could have made money as a commission agent. She could have got another servant to do the cake business. But no, whatever she doing, parlor cake, everything, I must be there. Haynes saw his point, an aspect of the matter he had never seen before. And she makes such a fuss about me and the nurse. If she didn't take up knife and all that, this thing would have died down. This thing would have died down, man, and me and she would have been still together. Haynes wasn't so sure of that, but he nodded. After all, Haynes, a man is not a little boy. It's all her fault. It's all her fault. You know, you would have done the same thing in my place. She always was a jealous woman, and that spoiled everything. It's her fault, man. It's her fault. He seemed quiet now, but soon he was lively again. I hear you and the little one nice, he said. No, Haynes replied. No, Haynes replied. You ought to know that that is not true. I don't believe in truth. I was only joking you. But I hear she in your room the whole day. That's not true. That's not true. But I am not her sweetheart. She is a hot thing, you know. So I guess they're talking about Maisie now. She is a hot little thing, you know. Well, I can't say. You can't see that for yourself? If I had stayed there a little longer, she wouldn't have escaped me. What a disgusting man. I used to kiss her and squeeze her when I get the chance. Plain pappy, you know. But how the nurse and me was nice, I didn't trouble her too much. What a nasty man, disgusting. And as she was young, I was in no hurry. I hear her filling out pretty. I wish I was you. She like you, you know. Oh. Some men have a way of talking about women and little girls. It's disgusting. Anyway, it's a book we're reading. How do you know that? Man, any girl like Maisie will like a nice young fellow like you. Ask her for what you want. If you don't ask, you don't get. He drained his glass. Though, by Christ, plenty of them today don't even wait for you to ask. She likes somebody else, said Haynes. Who you mean? That fellow Boyce? She prefer you to Boyce, man. I hear her say so. And even if she like him, what you have to do with that? A woman isn't like a loaf of bread where you share, you only sorry. A woman isn't like a loaf of bread. Where you share, you only have half. Haynes, Haynes, man, you are afraid. She always in your room. Choose your chance and hold the girl and kiss her. You needn't even tell her anything. You just hold her and kiss her well. Boy, if I was up there, I'd show you. All right, said Ben. All right, said Ben. See you, said Ben. As they shook hands, he added, don't be surprised to see me up there one day, you know. What? Said Haynes. Sure. Why must I give up there? Why must I give up there like that? You will give up the nurse? No, I am a man enough for two. Nothing doing for you nothing doing for you up that way again, Ben. I know she'll not look at you. You don't know, boy, said Ben, and they parted. Haynes had been hearing rumors that things were not going well between Ben and his wife, but had rather discredited them, considering the biased sources from which they came. But lately, they had been more insistent. Phyllis often met Ben in the street, and she first brought the news how he wasn't looking too well. He'd lose all the pig punch he had. Miss Atwell also brought some news from where she worked. Mr. Haynes saw little of Miss Atwell now. Mr. Cross, her keeper, was so remiss in his visits and paying of rent that she had sought and obtained employment in a shirt factory where she worked 12 hours a day. She heard from a co-worker who lived near to the pier that they had come to blows 2 or 3 times already. The chief source of contention being the little boy, Ben being the little boy. Ben was not in the least the cherished darling. Indeed, Miss Atwell reported that he walked about the yard with his naturals on the ground. That is to say, barefoot, which was a bad thing for a man who had been so ill. I see already his slippers go bad, and he quarrel about wearing his good boots in the kitchen, and I give him mine. And I stand up in this kitchen 3 whole days in my high heels till the Saturday night. I buy a pair, but it served him right, said Mrs. Rose. Mrs. Rose that she had said. The nurse had failed to get the promised job for him, and he was still unemployed. So this is the saying, they always said, jump out of frying pan. I said, jump out of frying pan, jump in a fire. So while he was with Mrs. Rose, Him feel said the grass was green on the other side, and he with him ungrateful said him left Mrs. Rose and got there with the nurse. And see him think the life not green over there. So I guess that's why they have the saying, jump out of fire, jump out of frying pan, jump in a fire. And sometimes the grass doesn't always look green on the other side, which is so true. The first sight of Ben had been sufficient to confirm the rumors. Ben had himself told Haynes in the past of the kind of disposition the nurse had. I must like the nurse, man. She nice to me. And you see her there, she don't care for nobody, only for herself and the child. He had spoken wiser than he knew. Why had the nurse married him? He had told Haynes once he could do as he liked with her. As soon as I kiss her, man, she can't say no to anything I tell her. Had he wanted to marry her, or she to marry him? Haynes did not know. It had been all very well when Mrs. Rose ran the house, saw after the food and clothes, and all the nurse and Ben had to do was to contrive meetings. But either the nurse had discovered how to say no, even after kisses, or perhaps he didn't kiss her so often. 6 weeks was a very short time. Still, as Maisie said, that was his funeral. So the wedding was his funeral. Haynes thought at first of telling Mrs. Rose that he had seen Ben, but at the last minute he changed his mind. There had been more than enough talk about all this business lately. But the very next evening, Mrs. Rose stopped him. Excuse me, Mr. Haynes. I hear you and Mr. Ben was drinking together yesterday, you see? So I know say nothing in some of these communities, nothing can hide. And when you think nobody knows you, then see you. You know, I was saying to a friend of mine, yes, day before yesterday, that there's nowhere in Jamaica. As a matter of fact, there's nowhere in the world you can hide. So when you think say you can go anywhere in the world and nobody know, you're frightened to know. You know, it's not who you know, it's who know you. So see me seeing Mrs. Rose come tell him. So somebody see them together drinking and chatting yesterday, and somebody go tell Mrs. Rose. You can't hide. Worse in some of these communities, everything you do people see. Anyhow. So here Mrs. Rose to him now. So it says here, let's read back here. But the very next evening, Mrs. Rose stopped him. Excuse me, Mr. Haynes. I hear you and Mr. Ben was drinking together yesterday, Mr. Haynes. There was a smile on her face, but a rather wry smile, and the lips were drawn tight. Was there a hint of reproach in her voice and manner? Yes, Mrs. Rose, I met him. We started to talk and we had a drink for old time's sake. He doesn't seem very happy with the change he had made. Doesn't seem happy? Is so you put it? Doesn't seem happy? Not seem happy? Ha! Ha! Mr. Haynes, you hear the latest? She calling on him to find work. He didn't tell me that. No, he wouldn't tell you that. But I hear everything. Everything I hear. Every day they're quarreling. But he ain't started to see trouble yet. For all he have done me and still doing me. You know what she tell him the other day? She tell him. Mrs. Rose drew herself up. She tell him, I marry you, and it's true I promise to find employment for you. But if I fail, haven't I do enough for you? I give you the boots you married in, the hat. Oh my goodness, this is so funny. It's so embarrassing if somebody tell us that they give you things to marry in. So here the nurse stood now his wife. Ain't I do enough for you? I give you the boots you married in, the hat, the ring, the shirt, the collar, the tie, the motor car. I pay for you to go down to Rockville Bay. I do everything for you. You do nothing for yourself. It's time you get some work to do. And, Mr. Haynes, you mark my words, The time going to come when she's going to put him in the district court for maintenance. He's going to have to find work. Make him sit down there. Make him sit down there, Mr. Haynes. But he's not going to sit down there. She's going to drive him out and make him work. And as long as he works, she's going to get her share. 1/3 the court allow you, Mr. Haynes. And she will get her 1/3. She's a woman like that. And he know her. He ought to know what kind of woman she is. But his punishment ain't begin yet. He isn't the man he was here. How could he be, Mr. Haynes? How could he be? I used to see after him here. If he wanted this, I get it for him. If he wanted that, I got it for him. But she, when she was out on a job, she getting everything she wants. He at home, things bad with them. All the money you see she was saying people give her, all the money you see she was saying people give her presents and giving him his share was money she borrowed. Money to fool the man, Mr. Haynes. But now she have to pay it back. They have no servant. He got to cook. I hear they have to share a little kitchen with some other people. And in a place like that, the man cooking food for him and the nurse, little boy. But I going to see him worse than that, Mr. Haynes. I'm going to see him go flat down to the ground. Mrs. Rose had worked herself into a passion. I know so when Miss Rose are talking a man and she get passionate and carry on. And they tell Mr. Haynes, say, Ben going to suffer for what you're doing. Anyway, Mrs. Rose had worked herself into a passion. Nobody spoke when she made one of these outbursts. Just kept a respectful and sympathetic silence and waited for her to cool down. But this afternoon, the voice of the invisible Maisie, singing softly to herself, broke the stillness. Sometimes I is up and sometimes this is what Maisie's singing. Sometimes I is up and sometimes I is down. Yes, Lord, down. Yes, Lord, down to the ground. So this is what Maisie's singing on, trying to provoke Mrs. Rose. Mrs. Rose exploded into wrath. You young woman, always there to make a joke of everything I say. Me? What I doing? Said Maisie in an innocent voice, coming round the house. I only singing what Mr. Haynes play on his gramophone. Look, let me get away from trouble, you know. Maisie went into Haynes' room and Mrs. Rose returned to the kitchen. While Haynes was eating, Maisie began to wind the gramophone. Thank you very much, Maisie. But what have you got there? Let me see. She laughed. You are too smart, Mr. Haynes. It was as he thought. Nobody knows the troubles that I see. A Negro spiritual with the words she had sung a few minutes before. But Maisie, you are a devil. Why do you worry Mrs. Rose like that? 'Cause I don't like to hear people talk such confounded nonsense and lies all the time. How do you mean? You hear all she's saying about the man? I tell you, Mr. Haynes, and you mark my words, if Mr. Ben come back here tomorrow morning, Mrs. Rose will take him back. I don't believe that, said Haynes, but remembered Ben's words. You don't believe that? I live here. I know her. You don't mind all that she's saying there. If he had 2 wives, she'd take him. She can't do without him. He have her like a little puppy. You remember what the nurse tell her? Doggy, doggy, look bone. Well, with all that big talk she talking there, she is no more than a little dog to the man. You know, it's amazing not easy. Amazing, Mrs. Rose needs to know, but why Maisie have no manners to Mrs. Rose? Anyway, Alright, let's start back here. Well, with all that big talk she talking there, she is no more than a little dog to the man. And especially as you're hearing how he and the nurse can't get on. Wait and see. Wait, you wait. If you live here long enough, you're going to see him come here and you're going to see her take him back. But Haynes was not listening to what she was saying. Maisie, he noted, sorry, let me read that again. But Haynes was not listening to what she was saying. Maisie, he noted, was looking exceptionally well, and Ben's words had come back to him. Just hold her and kiss her, and all would be well. He decided he would choose his opportunity and do the job soon. He had fumbled long enough. He knew Maisie liked him and was always giving him openings. Come on, Maisie, he said heartily. You are impeding my progress. Boldly, he held her shoulders to move her aside. She twisted her head to give him a brilliant and encouraging smile. They stood like that for a few seconds. Haynes squeezed her shoulders. She remained passive. Then, take care, she said. Someone is coming. And this time, Haynes was disappointed. So it looked like he must be the one who met love to her and hold her and blah blah. So it looked like she said to him, said somebody coming. And he disappointed again. Yeah. Story's getting interesting. Yeah. Tell you. And as much as all this is a story, these are really everyday. These are everyday life with a lot of persons in certain communities. All over the world too. You know, they always say, as I always say, we are characters in life. You know, life is like a movie. So we are all acting a movie each day. Yes, you have to have suspense, drama, intrigue, everything. So, yeah, life is like a movie. And these things do happen. As much as though sometimes there are things that we don't like. But it's life. So anyhow, we're stopping there. So we're finished reading chapter 20. And we will be back again to read chapter 21. So I want to thank you for joining me. And you can visit my page, Karen Vibes, KREN VIBES with an exclamation sign. Find me on YouTube, and you can join my readings. Alright, so thank you. You guys you all have a productive week. I hope this week will be a good week for you. And may all your dreams and your plans come true. And if they don't come true this week, you have another week, God's willing, for them to come true. So take care for now. And thank you, Exquisite Design JA. Thank you for joining me. It was a pleasure having you. I appreciate it. All right, you all. So take care, and we'll be back again soon. Bye. Take care of yourselves.